Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
In an effort to combat human trafficking, transportation leaders from across the country met this week. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford has details from the meeting, including what efforts are being made in the trucking industry to train drivers. New York City is taking action to alleviate at least part of the city's truck parking problem. Zach Miller is the director of Metro Region Operations for the Trucking Association of New York. I'll talk with him about the plan. And finally, California has been busy. Autonomous trucks, increased tolls on 7 bridges, and automated ticket cameras have all been on the agenda. Scott Thompson gets the details from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today, another lawmaker has thrown their support behind the truck parking bill in the House. Representative Steve Cohen of Tennessee is the 38th co-sponsor for H.R. 2367, known better as the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. The bill, introduced by Representative Mike Bost of Illinois, would dedicate $755 million over a 3-year period for free truck parking nationwide. It has bipartisan support, so does its companion bill in the Senate, which has been slower to add co-sponsors. It currently has 11 co-sponsors, plus the bill's original sponsor, Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming. Meanwhile, 2 safety groups are urging action on the bills. The Institute for Safer Trucking and Road Safe America sent a letter to transportation leaders in the Senate and the House recently, urging them to support the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. In the letter, the 2 groups highlight the need for and safety benefits of more truck parking, which by extension will help keep people in the profession. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance is out with the results from July's Operation Safe Driver Week campaign. CVSA says law enforcement officers in Canada and the U.S. initiated more than 11,000 traffic stops of commercial motor vehicle drivers and passenger vehicle drivers over the 7-day period. Nearly 4,500 citations were issued, along with thousands more warnings. More than 2,600 of those citations went out to commercial drivers. Speeding violations topped the list for CMV drivers, followed closely by other unspecified state or local driver violations. 38 U.S. states and Canadian provinces participated in this year's Operation Safe Driver Week. Next year's week-long campaign is scheduled to start on July 7th. 2 trucking sectors fared very well during the pandemic, according to a new report from the U.S. Census Bureau. Freight forwarding and long-haul trucking for truckload experienced the biggest increases in revenue. The numbers come by way of an annual survey that requires companies to confidentially submit revenue data. And despite obstacles like labor shortages, disruptions in port operations, changes to working conditions, and more, the Census Bureau says some freight transportation industries did thrive due to increased demand and higher prices. The Diesel Technology Forum has changed its name and expanded its focus. The organization is now known as the Engine Technology Forum. In a news release, leaders said the change was made amid new opportunities and challenges for diesel, as well as other internal combustion engines and fuels. The Engine Technology Forum, founded in 2000, said it will be a place for fact-based discussions as well as debate for meeting energy, environmental, and economic goals. ExxonMobil's bid to haul crude oil along California's Cuyama River has been denied. A federal district court judge ruled that Santa Barbara County was justified when it barred Exxon fuel tankers from taking the route on State Highway 166. This dates back to March of 2022 when the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors denied the request to haul oil from the company's Santa Ynez location to a refinery in Kern County. The board cited the risk described in an environmental report. The judge hearing the case cited the highway's sharp inclines and tight turns, referencing a 2020 tanker spill that resulted in 4,200 gallons of crude oil being spilled into the Cuyama River. Court documents said Exxon's safety mitigation measures were insufficient because they could not address factors such as reckless driving, road conditions, or unexpected hazards. The Port of Savannah is looking to expand. The Georgia Ports Authority wants to add a brand new 395-acre cargo container terminal in the middle of the Savannah River. It recently submitted an application to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers seeking approval. Construction would begin in 2026, with hopes of a grand opening in 2030. The Port of Savannah is currently the nation's third busiest port. Officials saying adding this third terminal would increase the port's capacity by 3 million containers each year. We are tracking 2 deadly crashes involving trucks that happened recently under unusual circumstances. The first took place in Loudoun County, Virginia last month when the driver of a Nissan Altima traveling south on Route 28 crashed into a semi from behind. The semi overturned and then caught fire. The truck driver, 33-year-old Cesar Yepes, died Monday from the injuries he sustained in the crash. 3 others were hurt. The sheriff's office says a driver of the Altima, an 18-year-old man, was traveling significantly above the speed limit at the time of the crash. He's facing a number of charges, including involuntary manslaughter and reckless and aggressive driving. And in North Carolina, more tragedy when the driver of a diesel tanker was ejected from his cab and killed Tuesday on US 264 East in Nash County. North Carolina State Highway Patrol says a DOT truck started the chain of events that led to the crash. Troopers say the DOT vehicle was pulling into the left lane of the highway from the median and then attempted to merge to the right lane. That caused the fuel tanker and other vehicles to take evasive actions to avoid hitting the DOT truck. The tanker forced into the median where it overturned. The driver, who has not yet been identified, was ejected and killed. The cause of that crash is now under investigation. The Port of Long Beach is holding an event later this month that's designed to help truck drivers with certifications and other issues. The event will help truckers with their transportation worker identification credentials, with obtaining radio frequency ID tags and signing up for the port's truck alert traffic notification system. Representatives from the California Air Resources Board will also provide information about the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, which requires any new drayage trucks registered after January 1st of 2024 to be zero emission. The event runs for 2 days starting October 17th. A health clinic geared toward truck drivers has opened up inside a Milwaukee area truck stop. It's inside the Petro in Racine off I-94. The clinic is run by Interstate Health, which says the location offers urgent care, primary care, and occupational health services. That includes DOT and pre-employment physicals, preventative care and wellness visits, vaccines, medication management, and more. It's open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And finally, don't try this at home, and please don't try it on the road either. An Italian stuntman just set a new Guinness World Record with a truck-sign wheelie stunt. Marco David Gioni drove a large truck through a less than 12.5-foot gap on its side wheels for nearly 33 feet. The stunt was broadcast over live TV. Viewers got to watch the process. Gioni tried 2 times to set the record and only made it through on his 3rd attempt. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Tim G. Trotter of Castaic, California. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 42 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 315 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella, and if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information on our website, landlinenow.com. If you'd like to join OOIDA, you can do it at a discount. Just call the membership department during business hours at 816-229-5791. You can join the association or renew your membership for 2 years for $50, a $40 discount. Next, Ashley Blackford reports on a committee set up to help combat human trafficking. I'll discuss truck parking efforts in New York City with Zach Miller of the Trucking Association of New York, and Scott Thompson talks with state legislative expert Keith Goebel. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. This week, the Department of Transportation Advisory Committee on Human Trafficking met. Shamir McKenzie is CEO of the Sungate Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides opportunities for survivors of human trafficking. She was one of the first survivor leaders on the Department of Transportation Advisory Committee on Human Trafficking.
I was one of the first survivor leaders back then, and here I am 11 years later, still connected. I am truly honored by this opportunity when I say that. It seems to me that the message is clear from the department that survivors are not an afterthought, but are crucial stakeholders in their continued collaborative effort.
McKenzie said it's fitting that this meeting is held in October, which is a month that represents change.
Most importantly, October teaches us that with all the changes in nature, life continues. As we continue to address the issue of human trafficking, we need to remember that life continues for survivors beyond their victimization. You know, we celebrate when survivors are extracted from their trafficking situation. Yay! You know, someone is extracted, and we should celebrate that moment. But the celebration shouldn't stop there. The celebration should continue as we create pathways of hope for survivors for their continuance of life. Sadly, the transportation industry continues to be used by traffickers as a pathway of despair for victims. I know this all too well, as my trafficker used trains, airplanes, and truck stops to traffic me in 5 different states. But I want to note that the transportation industry has created pathways of hope as survivors are extracted. And I really want us to stop and applaud those efforts. Pathways of hope should not stop at extraction, but continue as one transition from a victim to survivor to thriver.
Maha Al-Khatib is an alternate designated federal officer in the Office of International Transportation and Trade at the U.S. DOT. She provided an overview on the department's current anti-trafficking efforts.
So at DOT, we've been working with public and private sector stakeholders since 2012 to empower transportation employees and the traveling public to recognize and report possible instances of human trafficking. So human trafficking, as you all know, is a global issue, with children and adults of all genders being exploited through human trafficking in every part of the world. According to the ILO, 27.6 million people, or 3.5 out of every 1,000, were victims of human trafficking in 2021. And that includes 77% through forced labor and also 23% through commercial sexual exploitation. Their average trafficking situation is over a year, 15.4 months, and the majority of forced labor victims are male, and the majority of commercial sexual exploitation are women and girls. So there are several pieces of legislation that have expanded U.S. DOT's authority to combat human trafficking, and these include training for flight attendants, expanded motor carrier outreach and grant programs, establishing the same multimodal advisory committee on human trafficking, instituting a lifetime disqualification of a commercial driver's license for using a commercial motor vehicle in the commission of a human trafficking-related felony, training for public-facing air carrier employees, tracking certain air carrier training into reports, a triennial advisory committee report with best practices and recommendations, coordinating with transportation owners and operators to post the National Human Trafficking Hotline in the restrooms of aircrafts, airports, buses, bus stations, passenger trains, and passenger rail stations, and also expanding DOT's internal triennial training requirement to now train biennially in addition to instituting an employee counter-trafficking code of conduct.
Megan Cutter is the managing director of the National Human Trafficking Hotline. She went over some of the data from 2021.
There are areas in our data where we don't have, you'll see some of those percentages don't add up to 100%, because in some situations we don't actually know what the method of recruitment was, or the person wasn't able to share with us information about what the forced fraud or coercion they experienced looked like. So I think those are important things just to be aware of. And at the same time, we can really use hotline data to get a sense of it's a way to get a look at what is happening and know where we might want to dive in a little further. So in the calendar year of 2021, the trafficking hotline learned about 10,359 likely trafficking situations. And in those situations, we learned about 16,554 victims or likely victims. And that just means that some situations involved more than one person. So in some cases, we heard from more than one person being victimized by the same trafficker. In some cases, someone might reach out and say, I'm calling on behalf of my friend. I'm safe, but my friend and two other people are in this trafficking situation. And so the reason that there's more likely victims than situations is because more than one person could be victimized in one scenario. And often, we do see that. Something that I think is important when we are talking about trafficking and how it happens, and particularly the important roles that you all are in the transportation sector in helping the public identify what trafficking looks like, is that our data really shows that people are generally recruited by someone they know. Could be a family member, a caregiver, an intimate partner, an employer.
Cutter said the hotline has heard from truck drivers from coast to coast.
Drivers contact the trafficking hotline from all over the country when they see someone who maybe needs assistance, when they learn particularly of minor sex trafficking situations. And in part, that's because of the training that they have received and the support that they have received in identifying these situations.
Esther Gotch is the executive director for Truckers Against Trafficking. She spoke during the meeting about TAT's efforts to educate not just truck drivers, but the public in general.
So recognizing it's not enough just to raise awareness and train drivers, TAT comes alongside our industry partners and helps them train their entire workforce and adopt policies and protocols that also fight demand by prohibiting their employees to use company time or company work product to purchase commercial sex. And as their investment in fighting human trafficking increases, we then provide ongoing learning opportunities to those companies around some of the deeper issues connected to human trafficking. We recognize that if we were training up frontline employees to recognize and report human trafficking, we needed to ensure that ethical law enforcement would be responding to those calls and tips and taking a victim-centered approach. So since 2016, TAT has conducted in-person, in-depth victim-centered law enforcement training for over 9,164 law enforcement officers across the United States and Canada. And our motor vehicle enforcement model has been adopted by 49 states and 4 Canadian provinces. And beyond training law enforcement, TAT is working with departments of motor vehicles, transportation, agriculture, and education, as well as the international alliances and associations that govern those industries, the industries that TAT works with, and helping to create pathways of engagement, both in training employees of these entities as well as supporting awareness efforts. We also work with states on adding TAT training at the CDL school level through administrative or legislative changes, which currently has been done in 13 states.
Along with the statistics and efforts to combat human trafficking, Gotch had a testimony of a woman being saved by a truck driver.
And at the end of the day, all of this training and infrastructure work leads to stories like the following. On the left of your screen last September, when upon seeing a woman covered only in a towel standing along a remote stretch of highway, Winco Foods truck driver Joe Agallo made a call to law enforcement that did recover and result in the safety of a trafficking victim who had been left in that area. Or by the quick thinking of Sapp Brothers cashier to the right of him, Jessica Chapman, who used a rewards application to capture critical information on behalf of a woman being sexually exploited, which resulted in the arrest of her perpetrator on the job, in the store, the woman letting her know that she needed assistance. Or TAT-trained driver Arian Taylor, who was parked at a business to unload in January of 2021, when he got on a knock on his cab door from a 19-year-old who had just fought off her would-be pimp, who again had a connection to her. It was a friend's older boyfriend that they were traveling with. But when she found herself stranded with no ID, no money, and only the clothes on her back, she saw that sticker, "Do you need help?" Reached out to Arian, who called the National Human Trafficking Hotline, gave her water, let her sit in his truck and speak privately with a victim advocate on the phone, who helped her get back to her family in a nearby state.
Michael Crum is the lieutenant colonel for the Michigan State Police. He spoke about efforts that have been made in the state since he made a pledge back in 2014 to bring change regarding this crime.
So what we did is we identified and asked our 16 subject matter experts. It was the 14 that were the districts and then the 2 that started the program, to identify every single truck stop, every single rest area, every single large trucking company within their area. And we created a spreadsheet base of all of this information. We then asked them to go out there and personally visit every location. We contacted every location. We tried to give presentations. Our preference was 30 minutes. For that, we utilized a PowerPoint that we developed and used a lot of the TAP materials. But we also used a 5-minute brief presentation, knowing that if we can talk to a manager at a truck stop, if we could talk to one of the persons back to get this started, to maybe find a time when other employees go on break to reach out to them, those are some of the things that we did. And so we really focused on those in the industry that have the connections with our commercial vehicle drivers and try to get that information to them. To give you an idea, in that first year, we gave 162 presentations, and that does not count informal contact. So that does not count just individuals where we're, giving out information. This is an actual formal minimum 5-minute presentation where we reviewed stuff, showed them what we had, showed them what we're asking for, showed them the main signs to look at. And that reached over 1,744 people in 2015. So I think it was very successful as a launching point for this initiative.
Julie Abraham is the director of the Office of International Transportation and Trade. She said a lot of work has been done, but much more needs to happen. She started her talk by highlighting some of the successes.
On the leadership front, the 2019 Advisory Committee emphasized the importance of top-level leadership in adopting a commitment to combat human trafficking. And the department here has led by example, we believe. As his predecessors have done, Secretary Pete continues to serve as a member of the cabinet-level President's Interagency Task Force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. He also continues to call on all transportation stakeholders to act here in the U.S. and abroad. At the federal level, the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, an advisory committee comprised of lived experience experts and survivor leaders, is advising U.S. agencies to ensure a survivor-informed approach. Across the federal government, we are seeing an important shift in ensuring survivor input is incorporated with programs, training, and other efforts coordinating with the council and through other mechanisms to ensure lived experience input is incorporated. Survivor input is included in guiding documents like the administration's National Action Plan to combat trafficking in persons, in addition to DOT and other agencies' training and public awareness materials. And at the state level, there are several state task force and state DOTs that are engaged in counter-trafficking.
She also touched on some of the challenges.
Challenges to implementation include lack of organizational commitment, as was mentioned, insufficient funding, whether that's through appropriations or organizationally. So as you move forward with developing the next report, consider how leaders might renew or deepen their commitment to counter trafficking and what they need to make that happen.
This meeting is just the first of many to combat human trafficking. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. more miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibertech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibertechtvd.com.
Landline Now, welcome back. New York City is taking action to alleviate at least part of the city's truck parking problem. Zach Miller is the director of Metro Region Operations for the Trucking Association of New York. I talked with him about the plan.
This is really, really exciting. As we know, the lack of overnight truck parking is a national crisis, and it's particularly exacerbated in dense metro areas like New York City. So what this bill that the New York City Council passed recently will do is it will demand that New York City utilize some of their properties to build off-street overnight truck parking. So New York City has a lot of property that they rent out to private industry. So there are, at minimum, 3 locations throughout the city that are going to be transferred to truck parking. And this bill is going to take effect in 2026. So over the next year or two, the city is going to evaluate their properties, determine what makes the most sense for truck parking, based on access to the truck route network, based on amenities, based on driver comfort. So there's a lot that needs to go into it, but the important thing is that this is going to have to be done in New York City over the next couple of years.
You mentioned that it's particularly bad in metro areas. How bad in particular is the parking problem for truckers there in New York City?
We don't have the hard data that exists nationwide. We know nationwide there's one spot for every 11 vehicles on the road. To the best of our estimates, it's about one spot for every 25 trucks in New York City. It may actually be a little bit worse than that, but based on what we've been told, it's about 1 in 25. And I think that also has to do with a little more leniency given in that data set, because New York City only has 3 actual truck stops. There's one by JFK, there's one by Hunts Point, and there's one in Long Island City. That's it. So this bill alone is going to double truck parking capacity.
Do you have a sense of where the need is the greatest in New York City? I realize, as you said, you don't have the hard figures, but just knowing the city as you do you have a sense of where the greatest need is?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think it's shifted a little bit. We know even though there is a place in JFK, we know there's massive demand by JFK Airport. There's a lot of trucks that park overnight in the surrounding communities. That actually kickstarted a lot of these conversations, residents just saying, listen, we understand truck drivers need a place to go, but there has to be something better than them parking in these residential streets. And of course, we agree with that. So it's great to see the city take a leap. But yeah, by JFK in that heavy industrial zone, we know in parts of the Bronx and Brooklyn, Red Hook, Hunts Point, those heavy industrial areas, there are still problems. And the challenge is, due to the rise in e-commerce that really exploded since the pandemic, there's a lot of residential needs too. So I think there's that sort of extra challenge of making sure that not only is there a location where the trucks are near those industrial zones, but also a place where they can have access to residential areas to make those e-commerce next day deliveries that so many are demanding.
How has the city reacted so far to the truck parking crisis? What has been the city government's reaction?
I have to give the city government a lot of credit. Now, the first idea was enforcement. It's kind of typical, right? Oh, we see trucks doing something we don't want them to do, enforcement. So especially by that JFK area, there was a pretty significant enforcement blitz about a year ago or so that kickstarted a lot of this. But through conversations we had with city leadership and residents, we said, look, we understand enforcement. Enforcement is a tool in the toolkit, but it's not a solution. We explained the hours of service rules. We explained the lack of parking. We explained the rise of e-commerce. And most people really understood it. Though enforcement is always going to be there, that's where the mayor decided to kickstart a overnight truck parking task force. I believe they meet every Monday, all relevant city agencies, to come up with ideas and strategies. In conversations we had with the city council, they were able to move this piece of legislation through. From the mayor's side, we expect to get a briefing later this month, early in November, what their full plan is. We're hearing some really good ideas. One of the ideas we're hearing that the Trucking Association has been very supportive of and promoting is to allow trucks to park on street in industrial business zones. New York City has 21 industrial business zones. I can't say that it'll make sense for each and every one of them, but there are definitely industrial business zones where they could change signage, they could change meter regulations to allow for trucks to park off night in those zones. I think the taking what the city council passed and taking it a little bit out of city-owned property into private property, building out a public-private partnership in various locations throughout the city to coincide with the city council's plan, to coincide with industrial business zone parking, to really create a patchwork of a truck parking network here is something that's been discussed. I know long-term there are conversations about are there ways to change zoning to allow for overnight truck parking, a couple of spots here and there throughout the city, though, that'll make a difference. And I think that even just education, even just informing New Yorkers that these are the rules, truck drivers their hours are regulated by the federal government. They have to pull over and rest when they're running out of hours. We need to provide them a place to park. We also need, New York City has, as I'm sure you and the listeners are aware, rather substantial climate target goals for, reducing carbon throughout the city, not just transportation network, through every industry. And what we've been saying is, it might sound counterproductive, but it's not. If you want to shift modes from trucks to either cargo bikes or to maritime, or even you want more off-hour deliveries to happen, you need specific truck infrastructure to facilitate all of that. And parking is the way to do it. The message we're trying to get across is to say, listen, we know New York City is heavily reliant on trucks, far more than the national average is. If we can increase truck parking to start utilizing these other modes, we can actually get the reliance on truck freight down closer to the national average of 73%, while providing our hardworking truck drivers a safe place to get their mandatory rest. And that message is really starting to resonate.
You did mention, of course, that there has been some enforcement, and I've been reading quite a bit about that. Can you give us an idea, in the cases where they have turned to enforcement, what sort of fines people are facing?
The fines I heard are pretty significant. I think it's in the around $500 range, which is significant in and of itself. I know there was talk about making it even higher, in the four-figure range. I will say that one of the sort of fascinating issues when it comes to enforcement is a lot of people complain that, hey, why aren't you towing the trucks? Well, the city doesn't have a place to tow them to. So, it's not just that we have a problem with the truck parking shortage. The city doesn't even really have a spot to take the trucks to. They had a massive tow lot in Midtown, which, of course, they gave away for development. So, yeah, the fines are significant. I will say that NYPD doesn't usually go around just giving fines. It's usually done in sort of a blitz type of manner. It's not something that every day they're going to walk around and just issue tickets. But yeah, it is in the couple $100 range. So it can be pretty significant there. But at the same time, a lot of drivers figure, hey, if they don't give me options and my option is I have to pay $500 every couple of months or even every month, it is what it is. It's something I could live with. It's a really poor solution, but it's something that is sort of factored in. And the hope is that given real options, I think the city will then say, okay, now it's time to increase these tickets into the, $1,000 range because they now have options. So I think the city is using a little bit of discretion here as they're trying to provide options for drivers before they really crank up the cost of those tickets.
You mentioned the options there, and you talked about some of the things they're looking at, like the street parking in industrial zones and so on. But to what extent would all of this that they're looking at make a dent in the problem? I mean, New York City is just an enormous metro area. Once they put all that in place, assuming that they do, how far is left to go until there is enough parking to accommodate the number of trucks there in the city?
Gosh, that's such a great question. And I think the truth is there probably will never be, a spot for every single truck that comes into the city, just as you say, because it is so massive. I think the name of the game is to make sure that trucks are not parking in neighborhoods. They're not parking on residential streets. They're not parking by schools, by hospitals. They're not parking in ways that are intrusive to the life of everyday New Yorkers. And I think if that is the goal, then that is attainable. But I would agree with you that if the goal is there must be a spot for every truck that comes to New York City, that's probably not very realistic. And I think that really it does become a quality of life for both the driver and the residents. And if the residents their stuff is still getting delivered, they go to the stores and they're stocked. They go to the pharmacy and their medication is there. They order something to their home and it comes when they ask that it come. And they're able to come home at night and they don't see a truck parked by their house, by a park, by their school. I think they'll be very happy with that. And if the drivers have a nice, safe place to park, they know that they'll be safe. There are amenities for them. I think they'll be very happy with that. And I think that's a very fair balance for us to reach here in this city, if we're able to pull it off.
I noticed that looking at that bill that it has a date of 2025. And one assumes that it might be even 2026 before they actually start getting some of these lots set up. Is that too long to wait for truckers who are facing fines now?
I think it definitely is too long if they really continue with enforcement blitzes or if they increase the fines. I think the challenge the city has, and it really is a challenge nationwide because you could find land, right? Like you could find a lot, just an empty lot and say, well, we could put up a fence here or something and we could have trucks go there. And trucks do that. We know trucks go to big box stores in the parking lots and it happens in New York City too. I know there are some Costco's around the city that trucks tend to congregate in, some Home Depots as well. And that's all well and good. But that's not fair to the drivers. The drivers need real amenities. They need a place where they feel comfortable, where they have, either they could use a restroom, they could have a shower, they could get a fresh meal. That's really important too. And I think that, yes, we need a solution now, but we really need to get something right in the long term. And I am optimistic, cautiously always in New York City, but optimistic that this bill is designed to succeed. And it might take a little bit longer than we'd like, but the plan is to have long-term success here.
Okay, well, Zach, that's all I've got. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was Zach Miller, the Director of Metro Region Operations for the Trucking Association of New York, talking about a new law in New York City that calls for more truck parking. For Landline Now, I'm Mark Reddig.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to the show. Scott Thompson here, and sitting not 5 feet away from me to my right is Keith Coble of Landline Magazine, and that can mean only one thing. It's time for our weekly state legislative update. Keith, how are you?
Scott, doing all right. How you doing?
Doing just fine over here. We're going to spend some time in California again this week, as we did recently as well. That's because there's a lot going on there in California. Lawmakers have been busy with a number of trucking-related bills. Let's start with this bill on autonomous trucks that made it all the way through the legislature with pretty strong support, got to the governor's desk, and then died. Or I guess it was killed, to be more specific here. Let's start with the bill itself.
Okay, do you need me for any of this? Or are you just going to read my story,
That's
Scott?
it. We're done.
No,
but let's start with the bill.
It was what, I think it was like 2 weeks ago that we talked about this bill.
Yeah.
And that was once the legislature sent it to the governor's desk with, a strong likelihood that the governor wasn't going to be receptive to it. We got that heads up whenever the governor's administration during the committee, the legislative process, they had a committee hearing and they went in and tried to tamp down some enthusiasm among lawmakers for this legislation that would, in effect, restrict the use of autonomous trucks throughout the state. As it is now, and as it has been for some time, autonomous trucks, if you don't have a driver behind the wheel, they're prohibited in California. Now, of course, folks are well aware of the fact, I think, that smaller vehicles, they are authorized for usage there in the state. But yeah, this one specifically focusing on vehicles in excess of 10,000 pounds and trying to, do the kids say slow the roll, or is that kind of a date? is that even dated?
You're asking the wrong person, man.
Slow the roll of
probably dated, yeah.
The state DMV that is considering changes to that autonomous trucks ban that has been in place. So that concern of opening the door to the use of large autonomous vehicles without drivers behind the wheel spurred this legislation. That I think it's fair to say it swept through the State House, even after the governor's office took the unusual step of making their thoughts known publicly, how they viewed legislation.
Yeah, usually when you have something like this and it gets through the legislature and the legislature is controlled by the same party that the governor is a part of, typically they're on the same page and typically that bill gets passed and signed into law. Not the case here, obviously, as you pointed out there, which raises the question. You've got lawmakers on this side of the issue who said that we do need this law. You've got the governor obviously vetoing it. The question being, what is his opposition to this idea, I suppose?
His veto statement boiled down to it's unnecessary. They've already got rules in place, state law, that allows the Department of Motor Vehicles there, gives them the authority to regulate the testing and the deployment of autonomous vehicles on the state's roadways, and that includes large autonomous vehicles. So communicating the point from the governor's point that it's redundant, they don't have to have something new to address this. It's already put in place. Also, the governor stated that this legislation amounted to essentially just an outright ban on autonomous heavy trucks, which, the bill's sponsor didn't really, like that phrasing by the governor, pointing out that it was specifically, lined out in the legislation that this authorizes testing, and it sets in place the process that they could continue to test on state roadways and work towards the day when you would be able to have, again, these large autonomous trucks on the state's roadways without human operators. But it slows the process down. Anyway, that was pretty much it. And it's you pointed out, the governor being the same party of the majority of the legislature. I had mentioned that the bill went through the state house, both chambers, bipartisan support. A lot of times when legislation is vetoed by the governor, when it's got that much support, well, it's a strong contender for having a veto override, where you have to have a supermajority of the legislature to do that. But they already had that in getting the legislation approved. But going back to the same party being in control of the governor's office and the legislature, a lot of times, no matter what the issue, the legislature does not like to go against their governor, again, being the same party. So, and this is one of those cases. They're not going to be able to get a veto done. So it'll be something they'll have to readdress here within the next year, which the bill sponsor has said that she will continue to work with the governor trying to address the issue.
There you go. We'll stay in California here for our next issue, but zooming into the Bay Area in particular, there was a plan there to increase tolls on San Francisco area bridges, but this is another idea that has been left to die, Keith.
Yeah, this one was the bill sponsors, I guess, essentially admission that the bill wasn't going anywhere. It didn't get very far, other than the fact that it was approved by the Senate. But once I got over to the Assembly there in California, it was really running up against some opposition. Again, this is legislation that would have authorized a $1.50 toll increase for the I believe it's 7 state-owned bridges there in the Bay Area, and that would have been in place for the next 5 years. A lot of times, we're talking about whether it be a toll increase or a fuel tax increase or some sort of fee increase that the money's going for transportation purposes. A lot of times you like to see it go for roads since it's being collected from people who are using roads. In this particular case, this legislation would have kept it for transportation, but it would have been going for public transit. So I guess in and a roundabout way, I guess it could have benefited road users. Mm-hmm. It would have taken more people off the roads. But the amount and just concern about going about it and how the effect that it would have on obviously the bridge users and those of low and middle income households really pretty much. The bill sponsor recognized that this bill had no chance.
Back to the drawing board there. One more quick story here out of California as well. This one's surrounding ticket cameras, and it's landed on Governor Newsom's desk. What is the plan here? Yeah, and this is one that could be signed maybe by the time we're talking right now, because the legislature's wrapped up and they've gone to the governor's desk, and decisions will be happening very quickly. But yeah, this one would authorize the use of speed cameras in the state. Right now, speed cameras are prohibited. They do have red light cameras. Specifically, this legislation would authorize about 6 locales around the state, as you would expect, areas like Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, Long Beach. They would be authorized to place speed cameras in certain areas. Worth pointing out, freeways and expressways, this would not apply to those roadways. It would be limited to areas that have been identified as being safety corridors or having a high number of crashes, where they've had street racing events, that there are concerns about those. It would authorize the use of speed cameras in those specific areas, in those specific cities. And the chances, you say, of this one being signed, pretty high, it sounds like.
I think there's it appears to be there's a very good chance, yes.
We'll keep an eye on that, updates as we get them. Keith, we're out of time, but always good to see you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And our thanks to you for listening as well. That's our show for today. You can check out updates on these stories and any others from states out there at landline.media. Just click on the News tab and scroll down to News by State. We're back again tomorrow with another show and then another the day after that. So we hope to see you then. Until next time, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome,
And
I am
I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.